Hi there, welcome to our channel, Our Little French Dream and Big Journey. I am Sally Ann. My husband Andrew is at work. No change there yet. Today we've got quite a lot of news to tell you, so I'm going to try and break it down because a lot has happened since. We have looked into opening a French bank account. That's an ordeal in itself. I have set up the budget tracker, although there's still a bit of work to do. We have been to France to view more houses, so we will send you, well, we will put more pics on this so that you can have a look. And we are actually in the process of waiting to hear whether our offer is going to be accepted on one of them. So fingers crossed, we should hear later on today, tomorrow. Don't know if it will, don't know if it won't. And finally, we are moving to a winter pitch at the end of next week. So there is a lot going on and there's a lot to go through. Okay, bank accounts. Where do I start? A couple of things that everybody needs to get their head around if you want to open a French bank account. They're not free. So there will be bank charges. And there will be charges to have a credit card, like monthly fees, yearly fees, those kind of things. There are also withdrawal limits on how much you're allowed to take out of your bank account each week / month. So you need to work out which one is going to be good for you, or how near or far the bank is, so that you can talk to them and negotiate a higher limit for a set period of time. There's a big difference in the banking operations as well. For instance, if you bank with one bank in your local town, say for instance we banked with Crédit Agricole in Sordeval, and we were in Caen, and I wanted to talk to somebody about my account. I could go into Crédit Agricole in Caen, I could deposit money, but they don't have access to your bank. So they can't talk to you about much. They can't tell you what's happening on your account. They can't tell you when a cheque's being processed, all those kind of things. So it's a bit like having a franchise system where they've all got the same name, same brand, but they operate totally independently. And from what I can gather locally as well, your bank account manager is the person that you deal with. So if you are in the process of, say, applying for a loan and the bank manager's on holiday, So a couple of things that you need to get your head around in terms of when you can and can't make decisions over opening bank accounts, what kind of bank account and where do you do it? Do you have an online one? There are some limitations with those if it's just purely online, or do you have a local one? You need to know the opening hours. Obviously they all differ on that one as well from what I can gather. But also as well, over here in the UK we operate joint bank accounts on an and basis, so it would be Mr. and Mrs. Thomas. However, I need to delve a little bit more into this. You can have Mr. or Mrs. On the French ones, but there are implications and I can't quite get my head around which one it is. So for instance, if we open a bank account and we put it in Mr. and Mrs. and then something happens to one of us, not sure if that's the one where the bank account needs to close because there's not two people. It's really complicated. Or if it's the Mr. or Mrs. that will allow somebody to continue with the bank account should something unfortunately happen to us. So it sounds a little bit like we need to do a bit more work, get an authoritative decision, preferably in writing as well from what I can gather, before we make that decision. There are quite a lot of banks that I looked at, but I particularly looked at some nationals like HSBC and First Direct, where you could open a bank account from the UK. There are ones that you could open when you're over there, like the Crédit Agricole. So there's not really the rush that I thought there would be. We can do that later on down the line. And I do think that we need to get a little bit more information and look at the local branch to where we live. From what I can gather, there is good and bad in whichever bank you choose, like anything, and wherever you choose to open one. So I'm trying not to get too worried about it now. Overall, though, the charges for the accounts don't vary that much, but I do think it's important to be local, and it's obviously important to set it up correctly. And I think we need to look at what we're going to spend daily or on monthly, weekly, whatever they want initially, because obviously we're going over on a renovation project, so our bank account will not just be for general day-to-day living. So having a £200 cap on it, probably not going to suit us. But again, that's down to, you know, us negotiating that individually. One of the other things that we need to look at is how do we transfer the money from the UK house sale. So I will be looking into, you know, well, I have already looked into it, but I will be looking further into how we do that. The currency exchanges. Because if we do get accepted on this house, it's norm to put 10% down. So we need to transfer 10% of the house sale, if we do get it, into the notaires account. And that money there is held until the sale is processed. So we need to look at that. I'm also going to be changing money on a regular basis into euros from here. I know the exchange rate is not really great at the moment, but I think that while all these things are being set up, we need money to go. We need to have money ready on whatever we choose to do. So bank accounts, good and bad. I did look on Facebook, Strictly Fiscal, some of the Facebook groups just on France in general, where people had put down their experiences. Then I took those names and looked online at what their fees were. So haven't yet made a decision. We might actually open 2 accounts just to make life easier. Who knows? Okay. Okay, so budget update. And Andy, while you're at work, you'll notice that we do have new mugs on the caravan. He hated the tin ones, so I went out today and got some nice ones. Not really in the budget. Hey ho, not a lot of money. Looking at the budget, we have spent just under £6.5 grand so far without putting a deposit down and without anything else. But that does include the spending money that we've had on these trips as well. We did come back with a few euros. I think it was about 200, so we didn't do too bad last time. But it was full on, so we didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of things. Still work to do on the budget, and I think that will depend on which house we get and when. We've got to go back to basics. You know, how much can we save while we're still here in the UK? Track the spending. You know, try and not waste as much money. The cost of living here is going up. Some things were actually cheaper in France than what they were here, which is, you know, not known. We need to ensure that the last few debts are paid, and we don't want to be carrying any of those before we leave. And also I wanted to try and look into the sinking funds that we'll need when we're over there. For instance, as you know, we're taking my car. My car is quite an old car. It's only done 58,000 miles. It's only had 2 owners. One of them was Miss Daisy, not me. But we will generally need a new car, I think, in a couple of years. So I wanted to set up a sinking fund for that now. So I wanted to work out what we would need and how much we would need to be looking at putting away. I think if we look for a new car in France in the next 3 years, we're probably only going to save about 5 grand, which means that we need to be putting about 140 away a month, and that would be euros. So I've tried to do the fun things, got involved in the cash envelopes and put that in. We've also been doing a couple of other things in terms of savings funds, making sure that we do save money, and again it is around the cash envelopes. If anybody doesn't know what that is, put a comment in and I'll link you to a few groups. But we do have savings challenges. So that's my £1 one. So by the time I've crossed off that, there'll be £50 in the bank. Not much, but it all helps. So quite a lot of work to do on the budget. Quite a lot of thinking to do. We'll see how much money we spend. We have definitely got to be looking at the 10%. If the offer on this one gets accepted, that money will now need to leave the UK within the next 10 to 15 days. So I need to get on, crack on and find out what the best interest rate is. Is it best to transfer all the money for the house at the moment and wait for it to be drawn down? Or is it best to just take a chance and see how the pound does? We know it's not doing well. Okay. Okay, so the last visit was just over a week ago. We came back. We stayed at the same place in Vassy. Stayed with the same house. They're really good, really friendly people. Absolutely amazing amount of knowledge and help they've given us so far. Now, we had 7 viewings booked, 2 cancelled the week before, and they were really hard to backfill. However, with some of the estate agents we saw this time, because they were through third parties, meant that we ended up seeing 9 properties. And that was over Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday morning. So absolutely shattering. We came back Thursday afternoon. So Thursday morning we set off for the viewing around about 8 o'clock. And we got back Friday morning at 3 o'clock in the morning. So there's quite a lot to do. Over those days, we saw anything from a lovely romantic set of buildings. All of them were really run down, through to barns, total conversions needed, places that had got no mains, places that had got mains, septic tanks that didn't, none of the septic tanks conformed actually, working on a couple of them, or not there at all, or non-conformant. And obviously with non-conformant, we don't know why. They could still work, but they don't conform to the regulations, so it still needs more money. We're going to put some posts on in terms of that, so you can see the wide variety. Instantly, some of them were just not suitable. They just didn't look right in terms of how they, really just how they looked. They didn't float any boat. Some of them weren't right because the neighbours were too close. One had a particular smell. Could only take that. It comes from the silage from the farm, so that wasn't great. Another one we really wanted to like, really did want to like it. We tried to find every reason to like it, but there was so much that needed to be done. There was 3 buildings and space for glamping. Every one of those buildings' roof was leaking, so the roofs needed to be repaired. On top of that, though, one of the internal floors had dropped, and another one was going to drop. They'd put a sunken bath in one of the floors above, and there'd been some kind of flooding there. Well, that floor was going to collapse if you stood on it. They'd put a bar upstairs, which is great. Have a bar upstairs. Put the floor up properly. The floor underneath was collapsing. But the critical bit on that one for me was at the back of the house there were 2 braces holding it together, which seems to be like, oh, 2 braces holding it together, what's your problem? But the chimney stack as well was falling down, and there is absolutely no way I am not going to have a wood burner. And the only way around that one would be to knock it down and totally keep the chimney out of commission. So it wasn't actually going to happen. They were hilly. It also would have meant that we would need some kind of 4x4 car over winter. Also, some of them didn't have access, so getting works vans in there, getting concrete lorries, everything had to be looked at with fresh eyes rather than, oh great, we're moving to France, isn't this house beautiful? Doesn't the view look great? It had to be done really, really methodically. We had to check that each one that needed converting from agricultural to habitable had a positive CU. And actually the one that we've put an offer on hasn't actually had that applied for at the moment. Still waiting for that to be done. When we booked the viewing, we were told that the outline planning permission had been or was being done. That hasn't, but it's still a contender, so we'll see. So we might have found something, not too far from a main road, but when I call it a main road, their main roads are the equivalent of our country roads. As we drive into these places, if we saw 5 cars in a row, we think, oh, that's busy. Obviously motorways, proper motorways were totally different, but again, nowhere near as busy as here. Very quiet. Not as much land as I would have liked, and I have initially asked whether that would be possible, and it might be in future. So only 2,500 square metres. It's one house and three agricultural buildings that would make 2 gîtes. So that would be the route that we're going. And it's only 1 hour from Caen, so it's not far. I did put in the offer, though, that there were certain conditions to the offer, which are really important. One is the positive CU, the outline planning permission. But 2, now that business plans have to be signed off locally by the local prefecture, that business plan needs to be done in advance of applying for the visa. So that would also be a condition as well. And when we apply for a visa, we put a future date down to make sure that the sale would go through. If it is accepted, she did say they're looking at 3 to 4 months. Should hear later on today. So fingers crossed, and we will keep you updated on that one. Finally, we are due to move next week from the pitch where we are onto a winter pitch. We've been using this site now for about 10 years and it's been absolutely wonderful, but they don't open after October. And as you know, I've just said, it may be January or February if we're successful on this one house. So we do need to have somewhere that is going to be open over Christmas. That move is next week. Obviously, we do have some packing to do, not as much from the house, but it probably all need to be done, closed and opened within a day. So we'll need to take the awning down. Everything in the awning will need to go in the cars. And you might say, what's in the awning? Well, there's storage, there's table and chairs, there's clothes horse, there's another table that I can see from here. There's 2 fans because it was hot when we moved on. And I don't know if I told you already, there's a clothes rail. So there's quite a few things. And no doubt next Saturday it will rain. So if it does, we will still be moving in the rain. We'll be taking the awning down in the rain. We will be putting it back up in the rain. So I'm not really worried about, you shouldn't take your awning down and store it in when it's wet. It'll be back up within a couple of hours. We're not moving that far. So that's all got to be done. Okay. So what do we do now? Start looking at the pack and move. Keep my fingers crossed if the offer is accepted, because if it is, I'll need to create that business plan pretty quick. I've got an idea of what it is, got the templates. That will need to be translated into French and sent over to the local prefecture to be signed off. Once we've got their approval, I'll need to ensure that we've got all the documents needed for the visa, which is, not just things like birth certificate, marriage certificate, but it's also criminal records check, as well as the business plan. Everything has to be on. We need to apply separately and join the accounts together. Need to make sure that everything is in the right format, that we've given them details to our bank accounts, whole caboodle, as well as pay for it. Same time, I need to arrange that 10% deposit to go over. So again, it is fingers crossed. If it doesn't work out, we'll just have to keep looking for another house. But it's house number 19 that we've seen, so hopefully by now we understand what we want, and hopefully it's just a case of negotiation. Once we've got all the paperwork together, I'll need to secure the visa interview date. Obviously need to arrange travel, need to arrange accommodation, the budget that we've set for the house, because we did try and work out how much we'd need for house number 1 to be redone. Once we can get that on, pen and paper, that'll make things a lot easier. Then we'll know when we can start getting that one advertised, when we can start building a website, where we need to advertise it, what the cost of places like Airbnb are. So we'll be able to do that in much more detail. We'll be able to do an action plan of what we're to do for the first 100 days, the first 6 months, those kind of things. Okay. So I think I've gone through just about everything. So thank you for watching. I know it's been quite a lengthy one. There was a lot to go through. If you are new to the channel and you haven't yet liked and subscribed, if you would consider that, that would really help us with the algorithms. And we will keep you updated as soon as possible. I'm going to pop to Maggie's after taking Mum to chemo tomorrow. So if it comes through tomorrow and we get a positive, I might just pop online and just put another one on and just say, yay! Who knows? Okay, see you soon.